Okay, so I think we are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today is a little different. I'm going to call it a 10k subscriber special. My last milestone was 5,000 subscribers, and to celebrate that, I filmed a video totally in Russian. It was like a Q&A type of video. It got very good comments, very good reviews from all my Russian viewers, but it became very clear very quickly when it got very little actual numbers of views that most of you guys don't speak Russian. And you know, it's important for me on this channel to have as big a viewership as possible, and therefore it's gonna have to be English. I mean, most of my videos are in English, so the Russians who watch this channel mainly speak English, so why do it in Russian? So I thought this time to do a similar thing, a Q&A video from the questions that you guys have asked me on the community section of YouTube, on Instagram, mainly those two places. I put out a call for questions on Instagram last week and got a few, also here on YouTube. And I have a list of, 12 different questions I'm going to answer in this live stream. I don't really know what sort of viewership this live stream is going to get. Obviously the time zone here is nice, but most of my viewers are going to be in Europe, Western Europe or the USA, and it's not a perfect time for you, it's not the evening. So we'll see what goes on, and then maybe in the future, if this goes well, I can do some more live streams, and I can maybe have some more interaction with you guys in the comments in the live chat. So let's take a look. So yeah, like I said, I've got a collection of questions from various social networks, 12 of them. I'm going to go a few right now. So let's have a look. Number one, this is from YouTube. Did you have any stereotypes about Russia and Russians before coming here? And have you changed your mind after some time spent here? Okay, so this is a question I get quite a lot. Also, I get it in real life when I meet Russians, and this might shock you, but to be quite honest, no. I found that most stereotypes of Russians have actually been created by Russian people themselves. I come to Russia, people would say to me, "Oh, are you not surprised? There's no bears on the street, nobody's playing balalaika, people aren't drinking vodka and falling over in the snow all the time." And they think I am shocked, or they assume that I'm shocked that I come here and see it's like a normal functioning Western style country, especially in St. Petersburg or Moscow. But obviously I think the average British person doesn't imagine that's the case. Stereotypes which British people have about Russia mainly come from the news and from movies. These movies are mainly like Cold War, spy drama kind of movies, or maybe like a Jason Bourne type movie when he's in Russia, which means that the most of the stereotypes that British people have about Russia are about it being grey and cold and kind of dull. We don't really have the stereotypes that Russian people think that we have of them. I don't think you go to the average British person on the street and say, "What do you think about Russian?" If you go visit Russia, what do you expect? Nobody's going to say bears on the street, people playing balalaika, people drinking vodka on the street. I think we have a stereotype about vodka, but it's more like of a drinking culture kind of thing as opposed to it happening everywhere around you. So overall, I can't say that I did have many stereotypes. Like most British people, it's a Cold War thing, which we know to be the past. And it's also, yeah, there is the vodka link, but I think that nobody from the UK is going to be super shocked when they come to Russia, other than maybe safety. It's an incredibly safe country. When people came here for the World Cup last year, a lot of people were shocked by how safe it is, how normal they felt the country was. So maybe the shock for most people here is normality. But for me, it wasn't anything that affected me. Alright, question number 2. How long are you planning on staying in Russia? Is it somewhere you could see as a permanent home for yourself if you got the right job there, etc.? I'd say that my plans at the moment don't really exist. I'm lucky enough that I have great qualifications. I went to a world-renowned university, so in theory I could live I could live anywhere I wanted to, but right now I'm happy, and happiness should be the main goal for people. It's the main goal for me for sure, and I'll stay in Moscow until I no longer feel happy here, which, to be perfectly honest, doesn't feel like it'll happen anytime soon. Today here I have great work, I have a nice apartment I like, as you can see behind me. It's pretty modern and clean, and my life here is stable. I mean, living in Moscow means you have great access to the rest of the country, but also there are 5 airports here, 3 main ones, 1 smaller one, and 1 very, very small one. But those 3 main airports fly to everywhere around the world. Travel from here is very easy. I have no reason to leave right now. Of course, stability here is important, and Russia is very stable right now. Who knows what's going to happen in 2024 with the next elections? There are millions of theories about what happens when Putin steps down. But right now, there's no way I'm going to leave. I'm very happy here. In terms of a permanent home for myself, I can't plan that far. Who knows what happens when, if one day I get married, or I have children, or I make a business which grows. I can't possibly predict. So right now I can say I don't know, but it's not impossible. Number 3, does your family come to visit you in Russia? And if so, what do they think? My family came to visit me just once here in Moscow. We'd actually all been to St. Petersburg before in 2008 together, so they'd had an experience of Russia before. All my family members absolutely loved Moscow. They very much enjoyed the experience of being here. I showed them all the nice places, of course. I wasn't taking them to the worst places. But yeah, overall they had little to no complaints. They finally, I think, understood why I live here. Because when you say to people back home, oh, I live in Moscow, they think, you lived in London, why would you move to Moscow? People can't work it out in their brain. But once people come to visit here, they see the beauty of the city, the opportunities, the entertainment. They understand why someone would live here, and my family are the same. They came to see it, and now they completely understand. But I can't imagine either of them would ever live here, maybe my brother, but my parents said, look, we really like it, but we'd never live here, which I think is a fair assessment from somebody, especially someone from an older generation who would be resistant to change. And, I don't necessarily want them to live here, I want them to be happy, and they're happy in my childhood home. Okay, number 4. Have you met any other expats in Russia? Do you prefer to interact with them or with Russians? Okay, so I've met many expats here. I don't really like the word expat. It has a lot of connotations of when white people go abroad, they are even just Western European and Americans. When they go abroad, they are expats, and when everyone else goes abroad, they are immigrants. So I don't really like the word expat, but I'll keep using it in terms of this question. So I've met many. Some of them are really lovely, they are great company, and others are not so great. I'm thinking about making a video about this at some time in the future, because some of the British people, American people, English-speaking immigrants, expats here are here for the right reasons, and some of them are here for the wrong reasons. And you can maybe guess what those reasons are, but I'll talk about that in a future video, I think. When I arrived here, I originally told myself that I would not mix with British people. I just mix with locals. Not necessarily Muscovites, but Russian people, so I could get a better feel of the culture, the landscape here, and of course improve my Russian language. After a year or so, I essentially gave up on this promise to myself. I can't imagine now living a life without interaction with people who are from the same culture as me, or having life where all my friends were only Russian, having some common cultural references makes interaction with people a lot easier. Just being able to go to the pub and speak to some British guys while watching the football, it makes life a lot easier, and it's a real hurdle not having similar references, cultural references like that. So right now I have many Russian friends, but I also have British friends, and I kind of like the balance that I have at the moment. You see in most countries, like say if you go to London or New York, there's a Chinatown, in New York has a Little Italy. It's pretty common for people to move to another country but still stick around people they feel most comfortable with. I wanted to reject that. I wanted to integrate, to have Russian friends, to be part of the wider community, and I feel like I have successfully done that. I do have lots of Russian friends, I do mix with the local community, but I feel like it was also misguided of me to come here and reject British people, Western European people, so I'm trying to find a balance, and I think at the moment I have it. So yeah, next question. Number 5. Is there any other country that interests you as much as Russia, I believe, and you would like to live in for a while? To be honest, right now my main interest is the post-Soviet space, which of course by landmass is mainly Russia, but it doesn't only have Russian culture in it. So in theory, I'd be interested in living in Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, maybe one of the Stan countries, maybe Kazakhstan. That would be interesting. Or somewhere like that. But at the moment, like I said, I'm happy here. If I get burned out here, maybe I'll say, okay, I'll go and live in Kiev for a year, or I'll go and live in Nur-Sultan for a year. But I imagine if it gets to a point when I'm burned out in the post-Soviet space, I'll probably end up going to Asia or South America, somewhere completely different. But right now it's not in my plans, and the post-Soviet space, the former Soviet Union countries, are what is most interesting for me. Number 6, what was the hardest thing when you first came to Russia? Okay, this is an easy question. The answer is definitely language. I originally moved to St. Petersburg, and I found life there incredibly easy. It's basically the same as living in any big Western European city. The only difference was the language. It was a bit of a barrier for me. I had paid, I'm not proud to say this, but unfortunately I had paid little to no attention to my Russian classes in university, and I was woefully prepared for life in Russia. Like I said, living there is very easy for people who speak any language. Basically, the culture is very similar to the Western world, not Eastern Europe, closest to Eastern Europe, but the Western world in general. And it was great fun, and I highly recommend it to anybody, but the language is a barrier for lots of daily life issues. Not necessarily going to the shop, going to a bar, these things I did every day, but I don't know, if you need to call a plumber or have any of these issues, you need Russian. And at that point I just didn't, and I'm lucky today I do have it. Alright, next, number 7. Do you have any friends who are LGBTQ? And what is life really like there for LGBTQ individuals? Also, is it safe for travellers? I have a huge video about safety in Russia called "Russia is Dangerous?" And you should watch that. About the video about in general, is it safe for travellers? I'll give you a spoiler now. Yes, incredibly safe, but I go into all the little details in that video. That video has actually been copied onto a Russian channel and got over 100,000 views. Someone redid my voice in Russian, and Russian people found it very interesting. So that's also possible to watch. But to answer the question about LGBTQ, I know a few LGBTQ people here in Russia, and I wouldn't call any of them close friends, acquaintances perhaps. And a video about this topic is on my to-do list, and it is pretty high. One thing I can say so I'm not gay, so it's hard for me to comment on this, but one thing I can say with certainty, it is although it's not the best place in the world to be LGBTQ, it's definitely not the worst. Someone who is LGBTQ will experience discrimination from time to time, but it's going to be nothing like in many other countries. Being gay here, for example, is legal. Gay clubs are abundant. I can tell you a few in Moscow, a few in St. Petersburg. In the south of Russia, there's a few as well. It's not a problem if you want to go out and meet other gay people. If you think about like popular culture, a huge group of very popular male Russian celebrities are gay. Gay people are pretty much everywhere in Russian popular culture, actually. So life here will be more difficult in terms of discrimination than in the UK or the USA, for example. But it's not as bad as people like to make it out, unless you go to some of the North Caucasus areas where there is a lot less tolerance for gay people. But being in Moscow or being in St. Petersburg, I think it's I think you can live a perfectly happy LGBTQ life with a lot less discrimination than many other places around the world, but more than in the UK, for example. Number 8. What do you think about the protests which took place in Moscow this summer and the actions police made to suppress them? Alright, this is obviously very difficult to talk about. Of course, I support the right of people to peacefully protest, and I think the police violence to suppress the protests was definitely excessive. Thankfully, those were a couple of small incidents, and it was just the unsanctioned ones that went south very quickly. So I'm broadly, I support the aims of the protesters to have democratic, to have like full democracy and allow these people who wanted to enter the race to actually enter the race, to be elected. I think that, okay, of course, that is great. I don't condone police violence against protesters. I also don't condone a lot of the violence shown by the protesters. I think if we can do this in a peaceful way, I think Russian authorities won't clamp down too much. But yeah, I support the aims of the protesters, and I do not support violence by the police or the protesters. That's my very non-committal answer. Maybe I can go into deeper detail later. Alright, next. Number 9. Could you ever see yourself living in a remote Russian village? No. I enjoy visiting them, maybe for a couple of days, seeing what real life is like there, but I could not live anywhere permanently which is not a big city. I'm not from a big city myself, but I went to university in London. Now I'm in the biggest city in the whole of Europe, in Moscow. I could not possibly imagine going down to a small village. That's it's just not my personality. I'm sure some people who live here would love to go and live in a small village, and the only thing which stops them is money and career and things like that. But that life suits them, but it just does not suit me. So no, I could not do it. I love being surrounded by people in life. Alright, number 10. How much does Moscow differ from the regions in terms of infrastructure and living conditions? It's massive. This topic is also planned for a separate video I want to do, but if I give you a little quick summary, look at the GDP of regions in Russia. Just go online and Google it right now. The difference between the ones at the top and the ones at the bottom are massive. The ones at the top might not be ones you expect. There are lots of oil producing ones. But then it comes Moscow, St. Petersburg, and after that there's a huge gap to almost the rest of Russia. There's a huge gap between the very top and the very bottom, actually a shockingly large gap. There's a big reason why so many Russian people say Moscow is not Russia. I have a video about that as well called Moscow is not Russia. And the reason people say that is the money. Sorry. One of the reasons why people say that is the money. And the infrastructure and the quality of life and the cost of living and all these things. There's a massive, massive difference between here in Moscow and the rest of Russia. Huge. Like, way bigger than any other country I've ever been to. So, I'm sure, because I travel all around Russia, I send videos. I often show you videos from other big cities. I hope to in the future show you from a lot of smaller cities and maybe even towns or villages so you can see such a big difference. Alright. 11. Which Russian city apart from Moscow and St. Petersburg has the best infrastructure and transport system? Okay, so the obvious answers are the cities with metro systems. Let's see if I can remember these all. Moscow, St. Petersburg, of course. After that, there is Nizhny Novgorod, Novosibirsk, Kazan, Samara, Yekaterinburg. Yes, that's all 7. These cities are probably the easiest for transport in general, of course. They don't just have metro, they have buses, lots of them have trams, marshrutkhi. Obviously, the taxi services here are very good too. However, on top of those obvious ones, there are a couple other cities to add to the list, in my opinion, in terms of overall infrastructure. I'd have to say Tyumen, which I've been to. A video is coming from there very soon, in the next couple of weeks. And Tyumen has been ranked #1 for quality of life of all cities in Russia in certain polls. And that's been going on for about 5 years now. They have great infrastructure, it's very clean. We're here in Moscow, but that's a lot closer to the fields where they're getting the oil and gas. So a lot of the huge offices are based in Tyumen, so that's why they have such a cosmopolitan life there. And secondly, I would probably have to say, in a completely different region, Krasnodar in the south of Russia. Over the last 7 or 8 years, it's grown nearly 100%. I believe the population is 1.3, 1.4 million now. Continuously growing, the fastest growing city in Russia. And it's an attractive destination because of the weather there. It's a lot hotter than in Moscow, so lots of people are investing there, buying houses there, real estate development is going there. Because of the sunny weather and business opportunities, it's growing, the infrastructure is constantly improving, the transport there is decent. So I'd have to say the cities with metro systems, those 7. Moscow, St. Petersburg, 5 other. So there's Tyumen and Krasnodar, in my opinion. And that's only from the cities I've visited, by the way. Alright, and number 12, which I decided will be the last question. This live stream's nearly it's just over 20 minutes. Okay. What is the Russian city with the most exotic architecture? Okay. I'm not sure exactly what is meant by exotic, but let me just talk about architecture in mind. Let me just talk about architecture in general, because to my mind first comes Kazan. Kazan is interesting because it's a mixture of the Western Slavic architecture and some of the Tatar Muslim style architecture all in one city. It's a big mishmash of those styles of architecture, so it's exotic in the way that you see different architectures from different cultures. Now, it's not exotic, but I'd have to say St. Petersburg when you're talking about architecture in Russia. Most of these cities in Russia were built at certain times, and then buildings were knocked down to build new buildings, and then over here in a different era, some was knocked down to build new buildings. So you might see wooden buildings all the way to modern glass skyscrapers pretty much next to each other. Whereas St. Petersburg is not the same. It's pretty homogeneous in the center. It's like all the buildings are almost built at the exact same time. So it has this like grandness to it, this uniformity to it. So I don't know if I'd call it exotic, but when I'm talking about architecture in Russia, I have to talk about St. Petersburg. If I want to talk about something completely different, I have to talk about Magas in Ingushetia, which is basically a brand new invented city. It's incredibly new. I can't remember what I said in the video, maybe 10 to 15 years old. It's basically a housing estate with presidential and government palaces in it. It's very strange, very new. So like nothing you'll see in Moscow. So that's I'd call that exotic. And then if I'm going to talk about something completely different to Western Europe, perhaps it's interesting to talk about Siberian architecture. And the city I'd point to for that is Tomsk. They have a wide range of incredibly beautiful wooden Siberian buildings. Just really a great, beautiful collection. I have to point them out too. All right. So I think that's the end. That's 12 questions. I think that's enough. So starting next week, I'm gonna be posting, I think my next video will be in 7 days, the next Saturday. And from that till the end of the year, I promised in my last video I wanted to do one video every week, every weekend, to create some form of regularity. But I have so many videos from my travels over the summer that I'm going to try and post I'm going to try and post 2 times a week, so maybe Wednesday and Saturday or something like that, until the end of the year. So a lot of content for you guys. A little quick preview. I went on the Trans-Siberian Railway this summer. I went to lots of different cities. I have loads of videos from those different cities, so they're all coming soon, as well as videos from first, second, third class on these different trains. It's all coming up really soon. There's another guys in the last video, which was called The Future of My Channel. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream. I hope next time I can do it at a better time, so maybe we can have some live interaction while I am filming. You can see here now it's the middle of the day here in Moscow. It's about lunchtime, I believe. In the UK, it's the middle of the night in most of the US. So maybe sometime in the future I can give you guys some warning and live stream at a time. A few of you can come here as well. So guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you coming here to watch this live stream or the future recorded version of this live stream. Thank you very much guys, and goodbye.